It is 5 p.m., a Tuesday in 1955. The whistle blows at the plant. The shift is over. Thousands of men stream out of the metal gates, lunch pails in hand. Look at their faces. They are tired. There is grease under their fingernails that no amount of lava soap is ever going to fully scrub away. Their backs ache. Their boots are worn. But look closer. There is no panic in their eyes. There is no desperation, because in that front shirt pocket, right next to a pack of Lucky Strikes, is a paycheck. And that single piece of paper, earned by one person, is about to do something that seems mathematically impossible today. It is going to pay the mortgage. It is going to buy the groceries for a family of 5. It is going to put gas in the tank of a brand new Chevy, and there will still be a little bit left over for the savings jar. We call this the American dream. But for the men and women of the 1950s, it wasn't a dream. It was just Tuesday. It was the standard deal. You give your loyalty to the company, you work your 40 hours, and in exchange, you own a piece of the earth. Today, we look back at photos of our parents or grandparents standing in front of those Levittown houses, and we ask the same question. How? How did a factory worker, a milkman, a mechanic, afford a life that today requires 2 incomes, a side hustle, and a credit card? We often hear that life was easier back then. That is a lie. Life wasn't easier. The work was brutal. The discipline was strict, but the math was different. This is the story of the blue-collar aristocracy. This is the reality of when a factory job bought a house. Let's look at the numbers, the real numbers. In 1955, the average median income for a man was roughly $3,400 a year. To modern ears, that sounds like poverty. If you tell a kid today you made $3,000 a year, they'd laugh. But in 1955, $3,000 was a fortress. The minimum wage was 75 cents an hour. Eventually, it climbed to $1. A skilled union man, maybe he's making $1.65. Imagine that, punching a clock for $1.65. But here is what the history books often forget to mention. It matters what that dollar could do. That dollar was heavy. It had weight. When your father walked into the grocery store in 1955, a loaf of bread was 17 cents. A gallon of gas, 23 cents. You could fill the tank of a Buick for $3. Postage stamp was 3 cents. A movie ticket, 50 cents. So when that factory worker brought home his $65 for the week, he wasn't poor. He was the king of his castle. He walked through the front door, handed that envelope of cash to his wife, and together they made the world run. But it wasn't just about cheap prices. It was about a system, financial ecosystem that has completely vanished from American life. A system built on cash, patience, and zero debt. And then there was the house itself, the cornerstone of the dream. Today, a young couple looks at a starter home and sees a price tag of $400,000. They see a 30-year sentence. But in 1955, you could buy a brand new 3-bedroom home in a place like Levittown for under $11,000. $11,000. That was roughly 3 times the annual salary of that factory worker. That ratio, 3 to 1, was the magic number. It meant that the monthly mortgage payment wasn't a burden that kept you up at night. It was often $60 a month. Think about that. $60 to own your roof. $60 to own your land. But earning the money was only half the battle. The other half, the harder half, happened at the kitchen table. We talk about the 1950s housewife, and we picture baking cookies and vacuuming in pearls. That is a cartoon. That is not the reality. The reality was that the woman of the house was the chief financial officer of the family corporation. She had to be, because while the factory job provided the cash, it was finite. There was no overtime guaranteed. There were no credit cards to bridge the gap. If the money ran out on Thursday, nobody ate on Friday. So they used a weapon that we have largely forgotten: the envelope system. On payday, the cash came home. It didn't go into a digital bank account. It went onto the table, and she would divide it. This stack for the mortgage, this stack for the electric bill, this stack for the grocer, and this tiny stack for the rainy day. When the envelope was empty, the spending stopped. If the grocery envelope was light this week, you ate potato soup. You didn't swipe a plastic card, you stretched the meat. You watered down the milk. You made do. This wasn't seen as suffering. It was seen as discipline. It was a point of pride to owe no man anything, to be solvent.
We also have to be honest about what that house looked like inside. When we say the golden age, we imagine luxury. But living in 1955 meant living small. That dream house usually had one bathroom, one for a family of 5. Imagine the morning rush. The bedrooms were small. Brothers shared a room, sisters shared a bed. There was no air conditioning screaming in the window. You opened the screen door and prayed for a breeze. There was no wall-to-wall flat-screen TV. There was a radio in the kitchen and maybe a small black and white set in the living room that got 3 channels. We didn't have stuff. We didn't have Amazon boxes piling up on the porch every day. We had one good coat. We had school shoes and play shoes. And when the play shoes wore out, you got cardboard in the sole until payday. We lived with less, but we felt like we had more. Why?
So why do we look back at this time with such longing? It isn't because we miss the drafty windows. It isn't because we miss the lack of air conditioning. It is because of what we didn't have. We didn't have the noise. And more importantly, we didn't have the constant gnawing fear that it could all disappear tomorrow. When that factory whistle blew at 5 p.m., the work ended. There were no emails following you home in your pocket. There were no urgent texts from the boss at dinner. The evening belonged to you. The weekend belonged to you. You could sit on your front porch, watch the neighborhood kids play stickball in the street, and know, truly know, that you were safe.
There was a contract back then, not written in ink, but carved in stone. Loyalty. If you gave a company 20 years of your life, they gave you a pension. They gave you a gold watch. They took care of you. You weren't just human capital. You weren't a line item on a spreadsheet to be deleted when the stock price dipped. You were a company man, and that meant something. That factory job didn't just buy a house, it bought a future. It allowed a man with an 8th grade education to send his son to college. It allowed a family to plan 5, 10, 20 years down the road without flinching. That is the part that hurts the most to remember, because that is the part that is gone.
Look at us today. We have flat-screen TVs in every room. We have computers in our pockets that are more powerful than the rockets that went to the moon. We have cars that park themselves. But look at the cost. Today, it takes 2 incomes to barely scrape by what 1 income provided in 1955. We traded our time for things. We traded our security for convenience. We have more stuff than any generation in history, but we are drowning in debt and starving for time. The factory worker of 1955 didn't need a side hustle. He didn't need a second job driving a car on the weekends. He just needed to show up, do the work, and come home.
The factories are mostly gone now. The whistles are silent. Those small Levittown houses have been remodeled, flipped, and sold for $500,000. The world has moved on, but for those of us who lived it, or for those of us who were raised by the men and women who lived it, we know the truth. We know that there was a time when a paycheck was a promise. We know there was a time when a house was a home, not an investment asset. And we know that the good old days weren't good because they were easy. They were good because they were simple.
They say that you can never go home again, but here we try to get as close as we can. We're building a library of memories here on Vintage American Life, a place where the values of the past aren't forgotten. If this story brought back a memory for you, if it reminded you of your father's hands or your mother's kitchen table, I'd like to ask you to do two things. First, click that subscribe button. Think of it as pulling up a chair on our front porch. It ensures you never miss a story. And second, I want to hear your story. Look at the comment section below. That isn't just a comment section, it is a history book. Tell me, what was the job that supported your family growing up? And do you remember what a loaf of bread cost when you were 10? Write it down. Don't let that memory fade. I read every single one. Until next time, keep the past alive.